Welcome into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. Beth Hool, Kyle Emanuel, Devin Fry joining you here from the studios in Fargo. The rest of our team out at the Fargo Dome as we prepare for this one. This one a little bit different, a little bit stricter because of those COVID precautions and, of course, the NCAA now officially running the show. No field access.
Yeah, less fans. We're not there. Football or playoff football in April. A lot of different things about this week.
25% capacity allowed for the fans today. They did up that for the next game. It'll be 50%, but you know, you always bank on that fan crowd, that fan experience, and their ability to really dictate part of the game. And I truly feel like, I was thinking about this week, that's played a little bit of a factor in, I think, some of what we've seen this year from the Bison.
Well, one of their best games you saw at home was against UND. One of the best performances we saw from NDSU.
And the best crowd.
Fargo Dome was
most
packed.
energy.
So it definitely goes to show that Fargo Dome factor is real, and that's not going to be there today.
I played in an empty stadium just this last fall in Chicago. It was cold. It was cloudy. There was zero fan. It felt like we were playing a scrimmage in, like, you know, in the backyard of someone. You know, it was. You know, as a player, you like to say, like, you know, you don't want outside factors to be a motivation for you. You know, self-motivated, you play for your brother, all that. But there's an energy that's created with fans in a stadium. Everyone knows it. You can feel it. That's why people go to games, and you don't just watch games on TV all the time.
That's why people don't like baseball games maybe as much. You know, you'll hear those arguments that there's just not as much atmosphere because there's not as much to cheer about all the time, where football's kind of the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, and it is what it is, though. These guys, you know, they have to play. There's 4,000 fans or whatever there is. Go out and play, and you can't make excuses at the end of the day.
Still a decent amount of people, but when you're used to, you know, the packed Fargo Dome, it's a little bit of a difference.
It's odd out there. If you haven't been to a game, it's a little bit odd. Taking a look at the playoff picture right now, Eastern Washington, North Dakota State meeting up. This game feels like it should be coming way later in the playoffs. Just looking at these two teams, especially at Eastern Washington, 5-1 on the season, ending on a 5-game winning streak for the spring. That gets them in unseeded spot in the playoffs because Weber State went undefeated in their year, getting that automatic bid from the Big Sky. And here they are in Fargo, North Dakota.
And their one loss to Idaho on a field goal that I guess probably should have been good.
It actually was a field goal.
It wasn't good. Yeah, and they get sent to Fargo. And then the winner of this, looking like they're going to have to go to Huntsville, Texas next week and play Sam Houston State. We were talking about that. It might be a night game on a Sunday. Some interesting things here in this playoffs, in this spring playoff
Sam
time.
Houston State underway. That game started at 11, currently leading in the third quarter over Monmouth. So pretty good opportunity of that one.
It goes to show how weird the playoffs are this year, too, because Eastern Washington and Monmouth are in the exact same category. Monmouth played 3 games this regular season.
Yeah.
So it's such a weird landscape all throughout the FCS world this year.
And this is just at NDSU side of the bracket. Eastern Washington on the road in the playoffs for the first time since 2009, and recognizing it just as easily could have been the Bison in this same category on the road, you know, this unusual situation.
And NDSU hasn't played a playoff road game since I was a true freshman, 2010. Fall of 2010 went to, well, it was Eastern Washington. It was, and they played Montana State before that. And then I think another interesting, you look at this side of the bracket, Missouri State, North Dakota. Normally in the first round you can't play a team that in your conference, but because they didn't play in the regular season, they get a meet in the first round of the playoffs.
This is the game we all wanted to see for that Missouri Valley Football Conference Championship.
Had to get rescheduled.
Taking a look at that other half of the bracket, that SDSU side, I've kind of started to call it, the #1 overall seed. It's just, my head just explodes with this whole situation. You see Southern Illinois in there. That was a big topic of conversation. Twitter sphere not so happy with the Valley.
FCS Twitter was the most fun it's ever been on Selection Sunday last week. The 5 Valley teams getting in caused a little bit of a storm out there, and it was pretty fun to watch.
That's how it always should be, in my opinion.
It should always be.
That
Valley's, in my opinion, by and large, the completely unbiased opinion, the best. All right, well, wasting no more time, getting into our Proceed halftime report. Oh my gosh, where am I? Proceed roundtable portion of the pregame show. We're going to send it out to the Fargo Dome now to catch up with Ryan Gellner, Brian Shawn, and Lee Timmerman. Guys, we were talking about that atmosphere. We're getting close to kickoff. How's it feel inside the dome?
Hi, Beth, and yeah, good afternoon from the Fargo Dome, where the Fargo Dome lobby was probably as full as it's going to be. The doors have now opened into the Fargo Dome, so the lobby has started to clear out. Beth, guys, wanted to talk a little bit about atmosphere. there is a lack of atmosphere. I think what you expected back at the studio is happening here. It's very weird.
Extraordinarily. I mean, even the last couple games that we televised out of here, that's with a potential 50% crowd. Now, because of the NCAA restrictions, you have to cut that in half. So we have half of the half, and they need to be really, really loud if they're going to try to make an on-field difference today.
And I think, Brian, some of it has to do, not just obviously the limited attendance, but it doesn't feel like Bison fans of old, because I don't know that people know what to expect from NDSU.
I don't think people know what to expect out of any of this whole postseason, how it's going to go. Are we even sure we're going to have 16 teams lining up to play in this opening round? Well, it looks like we got there, which is good, but I just think this program, this team has been through so much turmoil and change, so much stress. I know every program's gone through that to a degree, but this team is here. They still have a shot at making a run. We're not sure who's going to show up. We're not sure who's going to be on the field today. But at the same time, it's playoff football. We've got to make the most of what we got.
Before we look forward, let's look back just a little bit. When we look at last week from North Dakota State, for the first time in a long time, the defense, I don't know if blame is the right word, but the defense didn't bail out the offense.
Yeah, no, it got handled pretty hard. And before we jump into that, I was just going to add, just kind of tack on to what Brian was talking about how different everything's been. I think no matter where this part of the season ends, whether it's today, whether it's in Frisco 4 weeks from now, you take a look at how the Bison got here, and everybody's talking about last week or getting kind of dominated by South Dakota State or losing to Southern or whatever. I think if you really get some distance, you'll look back and go, how did this team win 5 of the 7 games it has played in the spring? That might be one of the bigger defining moments to tell you more about the way the program is, with how, I guess, bad it's gone to still be in the position they're in is really good.
It's been a challenge, and it's been a challenge offensively, defensively, staying healthy, home field advantage. It's so different.
We're just so we're so spoiled to playoff games here and the buildup and the excitement of those over the course of November going into December, and not having that. And it's so it's 50 degrees and it's going to be really sunny when we leave here at the end. It's all just so bizarre and different. And I really, as LT said, for us, it's just so weird for us to be here too, and we're trying to make the most out of it. We're usually doing a spring scrimmage on this day.
Exactly.
This is what we're used to doing, a spring scrimmage when we're televising, and here we are doing playoff football, and I'm watching Sam Houston and Monmouth play earlier, and I can't understand it for the life of me. Here we are, though. We're going to make the most out of it, as I said.
So we've been talking about changes and things that have been off for the last year. Okay. So let's move forward now and talk about, there is a task at hand, and it is Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington comes in here, bar none, with the best offense in the nation.
Oh, it's not even close right now. I mean, Barrier's, 150-some yards away from 10,000 in his career.
Crazy.
I think if you take a quick survey of FCS quarterbacks, he's got to be at top of it right now. I mean, he's got a team that's number 1 in total offense. But with all of that said, Eastern's defense is not good. They are not very good. They are below average, I think, even in the Valley. So that is where you keep that Eastern offense off the field by being efficient, keeping the ball on the ground. They got the opportunity to game plan with Cam Miller as the starter, which hasn't happened all year. So we'll see how much that helps this Bison offense try to get things rolling on the ground.
Brian, in the final minute that we have, it is up to the Bison offense likely today to get enough points to get over the hump.
It is, and I think the one thing that gives me a little bit of, I guess, hope, if you want to say, going into this game offensively, is Idaho was down to a 4th-string quarterback, and they pretty much put in the option and ran a bunch of quarterback run game. They only threw the ball 11 times last week, and they still almost ran for 300 yards and only lost by a touchdown at Eastern 38-31. I still think North Dakota State's going to be able to move the football on the ground. We're not exactly sure what the offensive lineup is going to look like. We're not really sure what the linebacking core is going to look like. But who's ever out there's just got to make enough plays. And as you said, Ryan, at the end of the day, it just comes down to staying on the field and converting on 3rd and shorts. And I know that's been a huge emphasis for Tyler Roll and his crew this week.
And so the things we've been hinting at are that NDSU is beat up, and they are beat up in certain positions, that their backups also are beat up. And so when we allude to what's going to be on the field today for NDSU, we're not sure. We think Cam Miller is starting at quarterback, and beyond that, we'll see what the Bison have, and we'll talk about that throughout the show. One thing I do want to throw out, just breaking in the last couple of hours, Josh Hayes has signed at Virginia. So the Bison defensive back that was with NDSU earlier this season is now headed to Virginia, so congratulations to him. Beth, that's the latest from out here. We'll have plenty more from the Fargo Dome. For now, though, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks so much, guys. We're going to continue this Proceed Roundtable, taking a look at some of these numbers. You heard them break down a little bit on both sides of this, but taking a look at those NCAA rankings here, you see those numbers on that Eastern Washington side. That's the kind of stuff we're used to seeing, that we have seen the last decade on that Bison side, and we're looking at 50th in total offense. We're, 23rd in total defense. Those are numbers. Your group was in those 1, 2, top 5 in all of these statistics. It's kind of jarring to see, and you kind of have to look at this and have a level of respect for the game we're going to see.
Yeah, and I think when you look at, obviously that's NDSU side, you look at the Eastern side of things, and this is really an Eastern team that you expect to see, that we've seen before in this Fargo Dome a couple years ago with Cooper Kupp and all those guys that played in that game. But offensively, you look at Eastern, first in total offense, averaging 558 yards per game, averaging 40 points per game. I think when you look at this ball game, and it's kind of been similar a lot this year, but NDSU defensively, they're going to have to play well. I mean, that's just, and we say that every single week, but obviously this week against a guy like Barriere, a guy who can do it on the ground with his feet, through the air, they're going to have to play well. But offensively, and the guys kind of alluded to it, I think they'll be able to run the ball. I remember when we were playing and we get into the playoffs, we no longer have to play Valley teams, you kind of felt like you're going to have advantage on the line.
And Big Sky, they don't run the ball a ton.
They're not used to that physicality. They might think they are. They might think that they can do it. But they're just not used to it. It's different, so we'll see what can happen.
Team comparisons here. This is North Dakota State against their opponents, averaging per game in these numbers. So this is stuff that we're pretty well familiar with here. Looking at this, though, because we're going to take a look at those Eastern Washington comparisons next. When you look at those numbers and what the Bison have done, I think what just continues to stand out to me is had intercepted. And opponents had intercepted. There's the turnover. That turnover margin is huge, and that's somewhere where NDSU has always capitalized, opportunistic from their defense. And we just haven't been able to come over that hump this year.
And when you're going up against an offense that's putting up video game numbers like Eastern Washington's been doing all year, that's one way you're going to have to win is by forcing turnovers and getting the ball back in your hands and getting it out of theirs.
And they've been opportunistic on defense as well. And you're looking at those numbers, some of those that, Kyle, you mentioned off the top, that total offense number, that's impressive. You look at their passing game, what they've given up to other teams, just 200 yards passing in the Big Sky.
Right. Yeah, which the Big Sky to me is kind of like the Big 12 of FCS, and they like to throw the ball. They don't like to play defense necessarily. At least that's the way we perceive it. And this, I think, I don't think their defense is obviously not the strength of their team. I think they are opportunistic. They make some plays. They make some turnovers. And NDSU, going back to that time of possession, NDSU lost time of possession against their opponents. That's something we're not used to seeing.
Never happens, and if you're going to Mina Kimes this a little bit and get into the numbers and look at it, NDSU averaging 24.8 points per game. Eastern Washington's opponents averaging 24.3 points a game. The big difference there, Eastern Washington averaging over 40 points a game. When you're looking at the numbers and you're putting this in the spreadsheet, you have to have a lot of respect coming into this game. We have a ton more to talk about here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. That'll do it for our Proceed Roundtable. Coming up, we're going to take even a deeper dive into Eastern Washington, prepare you for what you are expecting to see on the field today. Stick with us. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Not quite a holiday vacation for Eastern Washington, but here in Fargo for the first round of the FCS playoffs, getting ready to take on North Dakota State inside the Fargo Dome. Ready to hydrate, it looks like. Well, welcome back in. We're going to waste no time heading right back out to the Fargo Dome where Ryan Gellner is standing by with the play-by-play voice of the Eastern Washington Eagles.
Larry, it really starts for you guys at quarterback, and you've got a good one. It has been a couple of years since we've seen Eric Barriere. Tell me about him, or tell fans about him. If they haven't seen him play, what are we going to see today?
Well, you're going to see a very exciting quarterback, Ryan. He is a guy that can make plays with his legs. He can run the ball extremely well. They haven't run him a lot this year because they want to keep him whole. But he is very escapable in the pocket. He can get out of trouble easily. He has a fantastic arm, so he can make all the throws. And he's just a very exciting player. He can score from anywhere on the field, whether it's a 80 or 90 yard run or an 80 or 90 yard pass. He can score either way at any point in time. So he's a very dangerous player.
The offense is dangerous. 559 yards on average, which is almost unheard of. And then you've got the leading receiver, which helps in the FCS as well. This offense is pretty good.
This is a really fun offense to watch, and I think probably the big thing has been the offensive line. They have been much better than what I think Eastern expected them to be. There's only one returning starter in Tristan Taylor, so 4 new players up there, and they've meshed together very well.
The knock is, if there's a knock on Eastern Washington, it's the defense. But when you even pull back those layers, it really was one bad defensive game. But other than that, Eastern's defense isn't that bad. Assess that.
I would agree with that. When Eastern has not been surprised by the opposition, they've played very well, I thought, defensively outside of the Idaho State game this year. Both Cal Davis and Idaho UC Davis in the second half and Idaho for the full game came in with different game plans than Eastern had expected. They had come in very much a dual threat type offense, passing and running, and in the second half against Davis and in the whole game against Idaho, they basically became an option team. And so Eastern wasn't prepared. It was like, you walk in prepared to play a passing game, and then the service academy walks in and says, you're playing us instead. And so that took some time for the Eagles to adjust. But the defense has been, I think, for the most part, pretty solid this year.
I'm anxious to get your thoughts on NDSU. On tape, I'm anxious to see what they look like. What's your take on the Bison?
Well, they're really good. They're always really good. This may be a rebuilding year just because of the youth on this team with just so few seniors at this point in time. So they may be rebuilding a little bit, but this is still a fantastic football team. They've been hurt at running back, and they've been hurt by inexperience at quarterback, in my opinion, and maybe hurt by the defection at corner as well. But this is a team that's really good up front defensively. I think they're offensively really good up front as well, although maybe not quite as good as they've been in the past, but it's still going to be really good. And to me, this game boils down to first down. If Eastern on first down can get some yards and keep North Dakota State out of a 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3 situation, which we've seen in the past 3 times in 16, 17, and in the championship game in 18 with this team, where they were able to get 6, 7, 8 yards on first down and set up 2nd and short. That's going to be trouble for Eastern if that happens today.
Well, you nailed it. 2 teams that are far apart on the map have certainly seen each other. Larry, have a wonderful call today. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much to Larry for a little bit of that insight. These 2 teams, they kind of talked about it there. He listed off those years. There's a series history between these 2, giving you a look at that history. North Dakota State has a 3-1 record against Eastern Washington dating back to 2010 when the teams first met in the NCAA quarterfinals. Know something about that one?
I remember that one well. I was sitting in my dorm room actually watching that game, and everyone's going to remember the Brock fumble or the not Brock fumble late in that game. And actually, if you remember that game, Eastern Washington needed to go the entire length of the field in the snow to tie the game up. They do. And then in overtime, they're going back and forth, Brock fumbles. And that's really what kicked off, I don't know if you want to call it a rivalry, I guess, as much as a rivalry can be for someone that's not in your conference.
And a way out on
the
coast.
Not even on your
left
coast.
East, that left coast. And they went on to win the FCS National Championship, actually outside of Eastern Washington and James Madison. It's been NDSU. And so I think especially the Eagles fans, they would definitely look at it as like the Bison are that team to get over the hurdle. The teams most recently met, of course, in the national championship in 2008. Of course, an NDSU win in that one as the Bison have continued to succeed. And then they had that home-and-home series as well, which brought an overtime win. That was that year that the Bison had back-to-back overtime games to open up their season. For teams that have met just 4 times, there seems to be so much history between them, and I think that benefits NDSU coming into this game, that there's a little bit, an obvious respect between these two programs.
It's not just some random small-time East Coast school that no one's ever heard
that
of.
Cal Poly matchup to open
no
the
offense
playoffs.
to those guys, but like
Right.
like a VMI, and everyone's like, "Who's VMI?" They just made the playoffs for the first time.
Right.
This is a team, NDSU fans should have respect for, and vice versa.
I would say two of the bigger name value teams in the FCS. Like even when I wasn't following FCS football, Eastern Washington, NDSU.
So that red field.
Exactly, mostly because of the red
Yep.
field and the good offense. I love both of those things.
Field colors and uniforms. I'll just never get it.
That's what win me over.
I'll just never get it. All right, well, we've got plenty more to come on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Stick with us. We're going to take a look at the quarterbacks expecting a different start for the Bison. We'll have those details next. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Beth Wool, Kyle Emanuel, Devin Fry going to take a look at the quarterbacks here. Now, we are expecting Cam Miller to be making that start against Eric Barriere today. So let's take a look into those Cam Miller numbers here. 223 passing yards per game coming off of that last game against SDSU where Zeb got that start, but Cam took over real quick.
I think, we've talked a lot about Zeb over the season, and, he's struggled a little bit. He's had some good moments. I just think Cam fits a little bit better what Tyler Roll wants to do offensively. That's just me personally. I don't know. I haven't heard that from Tyler Roll, but it just seems to me, obviously, being able to do more in the quarterback run game, a little bit more of the jet sweep action, getting the ball to Christian Watson, having that quarterback threat to run the ball. I think that's why we're seeing more Cam Miller. I wouldn't be surprised if Zeb plays. I mean, I don't think we really know at this point. Cam's shown some good things, but I don't even think it's fair to compare his numbers to Barriere's.
No, absolutely not. Not yet. You have to look at them because they give you a basis, but I think you're on the right path there in that those teams that had success against Eastern Washington this year that gave the Eagles some trouble, had that dual threat attack and caught Eastern Washington off guard. Idaho, UC Davis, they were able to find some of that success with that dual threat.
And that's what Cam Miller brings to the table. Even if this was just a game-specific decision, it might not even be based on performance. Even if it was just a better matchup with Cam Miller being a more mobile quarterback, more apt in that option game that we heard just now that gives Eastern Washington fits from time to time. So Cam Miller might just be the perfect fit for this time. We don't know yet. We'll see. But he even said last week he expected it to be 50-50 with him and Zeb. He didn't expect to be playing as much as he was last week. So we continue to just kind of go on this quarterback system right now.
The thing that makes NDSU's offense so good, and what we saw last year, especially with Trey Lance, their ability to get under center, 22 personnel, and just pound the ball in the run game and do things there, but then also get back in that quarterback shot in the shotgun and do all those things with the quarterback. I think that's why NDSU was so successful. They haven't been able to really find that yet this year. Maybe seeing Cam Miller a little bit more, maybe that's what they get back
and,
to.
Coach N said last week on his coach's show that there's a little bit of time you have to give Cam Miller. Cam Miller is not Trey Lance.
No.
He is not Trey Lance.
Not yet,
and so
at
to
least.
be not yet. And so to be making that entrance as a freshman and coming into the system, coming into the game, they wanted to give him as much time as possible. Zeb provided them that opportunity, and now they're kind of reaching that point where they need Cam and that dual threat that he had. You mentioned those numbers, not really fair to compare, so we're going to compare them. Let's take a look at Eric Barriere's numbers here, the Walter Payton Award finalist and Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, for good reason.
Wow.
And he's probably going to win the Walter Payton Award. I mean, that's who I would give it to. I mean, just looking at the numbers and what they've been able to do this year. And I was, watching some of the highlights. Actually, Brian Shawn tweeted out, his interview with Coach Entz, and watching some of the highlights of him and his ability to escape. When something's not there, I think that's we're probably going to see a few of them right here. When something's not there, and a play breaks down, a quarterback's ability to make something happen, I think, is something you can't really coach, and it's something that's vitally important to the position, and he does that very well. 62% completion percentage. We saw the number, 370 yards passing per game. I mean, he is as good as advertised, and it's going to be the key in this game, NDSU stopping him.
And quarterbacks who can improvise and, extend the play, that's given NDSU troubles this season. We saw it last week. And so that's something that's going to be a factor for sure, is just how well Barrier can continue to play this way. And when you have the ability that he does, it's going to cause problems no matter how good your defense is. So.
He has just 157 yards from hitting 10,000 yard mark for offense heading into this game.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that he's a senior, but he feels like he's been there for a long time.
Right there with Roseboom.
And he's been, yeah.
Roseboom,
Well,
we changed how we say his name. It feels like he's been there forever.
It does.
And even more scary, because of the COVID situation, he has another year. He has that option.
Yep, he's been around for a long time. He's been very successful for a long time. And Eastern Washington's been very good on offense.
And even more so, he's been consistent. He's passed for at least 300 yards in 5 of 6 games this season and has at least 400 yards of total offense in 3 of those. That consistency is so huge.
And that's the reason I said we can't compare those numbers. It's not fair. Not fair. His numbers obviously very impressive. And like I said, I mean, if you just want to look at this game very, easily, simply, can you stop him? Can you not stop him, but can you slow him down? That's going to be the key for NDSU.
And that's something you've heard NDSU talk about for so many years against some of that really top echelon of talent, and what people have said about NDSU quarterbacks and offense for so long. You've just got to try and contain them.
If you can slow them down, you have a chance.
Get them off the field, win time of possession.
Need to hold on to that football. All right, well, we've got plenty more to come in the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. We're heading back out to that Fargo Dome. Stick around after the break. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. We're headed back out to the Fargo Dome now for our Sanford Orthopedic Sports Medicine Injury Report.
Dr. Ben Noonan joins us today outside the Bison locker room, and we decided to change course just a little bit. We have talked ACLs and other injuries like that, and the question came up for folks that have had ACL injuries and therefore surgery. What's the aftermath for them? Because you have ACL, you play through the rest of your career, or you're retired, but down the road, that ACL injury can act up again. What does the knee do over time?
Well, it's a really good question, and it made me think a little bit about the incidence, especially of arthritis after an ACL injury. And when we see these young athletes, the majority of the discussion is really around sport. When can I get back to sport? What is the timing of surgery? And we probably don't spend enough time talking to them about that. In our last few visits, we do mention the risk of arthritis, but it's really important. Because once you've torn your ACL, regardless if you have surgery or not, you're in a high-risk group. If you look at all of these patients, anywhere from a third to a half of them will show signs of arthritis down the road. It's also important to know that that's not an indication for ACL surgery. It's not been shown to reduce the incidence of arthritis. A lot of that damage happens when that trauma hits the knee when you tear your ACL. Now, I think you could make a hard argument that if you take an athlete and they have no other damage in their knee other than an ACL, and they go back to sport and then damage their meniscus or the cartilage, you probably could have affected the natural history of that particular knee. But really the indication for ACL surgery is instability, not to prevent arthritis.
So I've had, not me, but in this general terms, if you've had one ACL surgery, it was successful, you're recovered, 30 years down the road, you're sore again, it's arthritis. What do you do?
So I think probably the biggest thing would be trying to prevent that. And one of the risk factors for the progression of post-traumatic arthritis, unfortunately, is obesity. And it seems odd to talk about that with collegiate athletes, but at some point the collegiate athlete stops being a collegiate athlete. And they need to be mentored and trained that, hey, when that happens, your caloric intake needs to match that. Unfortunately, we see, especially with linemen and guys who are eating a tremendous amount, they have to back off or that obesity can progress. And another big thing, which sounds a little cavalier, is try not to tear your ACL. Now that sounds a little funny, but there actually is things that have been shown to prevent that, especially with adolescent athletes. And those are a variety of knee injury prevention programs. And those are programs that work on core strength, hip strength, teaching athletes how to jump and how to land. Sanford has one called the Sanford Knee Injury Prevention Protocol, SKIP with 2 Ps, can be downloaded for free. And it's pretty amazing. In certain patient populations, these programs have reduced the risk of ACL injury by almost 50%. So for the young adolescent males and females, these are things they really should be doing.
Very interesting stuff. Didn't know it was out there. We'll check it out. Dr. Noonan, Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Right into our Sanford Health injury report for the Bison. Not good news on the offensive line. Gray Zabel out after his injury last week. James Kaiser is in street clothes. We do not expect him to play. Kobe Johnson with his leg probably will not play. A couple more offensive linemen, Zach Kubas and Zach Willis, questionable, and we do not know if they will play. We move right into our keys to the football game as we bring back in Brian Sean and Lee Timmerman. And for North Dakota State, guys, it's easy after last week. They just simply have to tackle better. South Dakota State with 305 rushing yards, Brian.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it sounds simple, but it's one of those things you just got to get back to the basics. I know Matt Entz talked about they were going to focus on that this week. And Jackson Hankey said it. There's times we've been really good tackling this season, and there's times we have not been good. This is not a team in Eastern Washington you can afford to slip a lot of tackles and miss a lot of them, because if you do, they can turn a lot of these 8-yard gains, 8-yard hitches into 40-yard touchdowns. That's going to be key for North Dakota State today.
Key number 2 for the Bison today goes on the other side of the ball. It's execute on offense. In particular, it is a mash unit and a juggling act up front.
It certainly is. You talked about some of those things, or players who won't be on the offensive line. Cordell Volson is expected to move from his right tackle to his right guard position to take over that spot. One of the freshmen, probably Rock, will go in at tackle, but the Bison have to be able to gain some yards on first down. When that hasn't happened this year, they have lost.
The Bison defense was not good a week ago. Can the Bison defense be good today? Key number 3 says they need to find the quarterback who is the best quarterback in the nation, Brian.
Find the quarterback and don't let him escape the pocket. That's what makes Berrier so difficult to manage. The guy can run, and right now he's running to throw, not just running to run. And again, you can have everything set in 3rd and 12, and all of a sudden he'll scramble for 13 and make you stay out there. Then they go tempo, they tire you out. They run 70, 80 plays. And with NDSU not very deep today on the defensive end, they can't afford to throw a lot of different bodies out there. And yes, Eastern Washington might move it between the 20s, but they got to be better in the red zone. They cannot give up so many red zone touchdowns. Got to hold them to field goal attempts and force some turnovers.
I will say, though, that Berrier is a different guy than Gronowski that we saw last week. He does not want to try to challenge you physically. If the Bison can keep him inside, force him to work his way up the field, and then to his left, that's what they're hoping to do today. If he goes right, he's dangerous.
North Dakota State, guys, it looks like if the Bison win today, they will go on the road. Just watching the last couple of seconds, Monmouth had the ball 4th and goal to beat Sam Houston. They were intercepted in the end zone. Sam Houston State is going to hang on and win that football game. The winner of this football game goes to Sam Houston State. The difference was if Monmouth wins, North Dakota State had a chance to be home next week. Will not happen. Much more to do on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show. North Dakota State and Eastern coming your way. Much more from the Fargo Dome when we come back. Welcome back inside the Fargo Dome. Another impressive streak has come to an end for North Dakota State. This is Herdline News. North Dakota State's 32-game winning streak came to an end, as you know, by South Dakota State. It was the 4th longest FCS history winning streak behind Georgia Southern, who had won 39 in a row and 38 games in a row, and Eastern Kentucky, who had won 34 games in a row. It topped NDSU's previous Missouri Valley Football Conference record, 26-game home winning streak. That went from 2012 to 2015. North Dakota State led all schools with 12 spots on the 2020-2021 All-Missouri Valley Football Conference team. The Bison had 8 first-team selections, including fullback Hunter Lupke, right tackle Cordell Volson, wide receiver Christian Watson, long snapper Ross Kennelly, defensive end Spencer Wagee, linebacker James Kaiser, and cornerback Josh Hayes, along with punter Garrett Wagner. Penalties have been impressive for North Dakota State on the good side of penalties. The Bison have been one of the least penalized teams, that is, this year. The Bison 2nd in the FCS season for fewest penalties and 4th in fewest penalty yards per game. That equates the Bison, they average just over 2 penalties a game and just 28 yards penalized per contest. Head coach Matt Entz was named the Region 4 Coach of the Year for the second straight season by American Football Coaches Association. Entz has led the Bison to a 22-2 record in his helm. I had the chance to catch up with the head coach as he gets ready for his second playoff season.
Matt, any different feeling this week just because it's playoffs, it's finally here?
Oh, I think they're on the field. At practice, there was some definite heightened awareness, sense of urgency, especially from our players who have experienced the playoffs before. I think it took maybe a couple days for our younger kids to go back and think about their high school experience, some of the guys who are first-year players, but they understand what's at stake here, and so our kids will be ready to go.
Eastern Washington comes in offensively, some gaudy numbers.
Yep.
Certainly one of the best in the nation. On paper, the best in the nation. You'll have your hands full.
You didn't make me feel any better, did you? You're exactly right. They got great core receivers, probably as deep as we've seen. They have a playmaker at quarterback. They have a lot of talent, a lot of tools. We're going to play at our best. It's going to be a challenge to get stops defensively. When we have an opportunity, we got to make it count.
Let's talk about the Bison. I know you're tired of this question, so I'll just ask it. Do you have a starting quarterback at this hour?
We do. Starting quarterback is going to be Cam Miller at the beginning of the game here.
Cam, I assume you feel gives you the best chance to win, and I know there's reasons that go in beyond that, but talk about Cam's game and what you expect from him today.
Cam continues to get better. Cam continues to improve. He's working extremely hard, behind closed doors when nobody else is paying attention to try to put himself in this situation. And he does give us a little bit more ability to run the football at different times. Not to say that Zeb can't, but we felt like at this time right now, and based off what we saw a week ago, Cam deserves the ability to start this game.
Obviously some injuries on your offensive line, but that's still going to be a huge piece of what you guys want to do.
It is. It doesn't matter who's up there. It doesn't matter what 5 starters we have. The expectations, the standards been set, and those guys got to go out and execute. And I'm excited to see that group get after it today.
As always, Matt, good luck today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
It is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show, and we will continue on with more from the Fargo Dome and our Fargo studios. Game time about 15 minutes from now. We'll take it right up to kickoff. Stay with us. Back inside the Fargo Dome, Brian Sean, Lee Timmerman. We get ready for playoff football round number 1. North Dakota State at home today, and it is time to talk about the player that you guys think will push the Bison to victory today.
Bobcat heavy lifting report, Michael Tutsi, right? We're going to need this guy to play big today. When you talk about defensive backs against Barrier and this receiving core, he's going to have to be on point today. And fortunately, I think for Tut, he has not been thrown out a lot. A lot of teams are kind of making NDSU play one side of the field defensively. They've tried to take some action away from him. When I talked to him about that, he said, yes, I've noticed that, but the one thing for me is I like to be aggressive. I like to get in there and make some plays. So we'll see if Michael Tutsi today can pick off one of those Eric Barrier passes. And this is, again, an Eastern Washington pass attack that's averaging almost 380 pass yards a game, and they like to put it in the air a lot. And they take a lot of shots deep, and it's not just one guy or 2 guys. They got multiple guys, 4 or 5, that they're comfortable throwing the ball to.
Tuts missed a little bit of practice time this week. He was a little bit under the weather, not anything that's COVID related, just not feeling that great. So we hope that he has his energy today. And we saw last week that especially in a quarterback run situation, that when it is a big run or Pierre Strong over the middle, that usually means that the safety missed. So he can't miss today in terms of tackling.
Kyle, I think you can hear us. The Bison, if they're going to get pressure on the front end, really need that back end to play well today with a quarterback can throw it. And as Brian alluded to, a couple of wide receivers that can go do damage.
Yeah, they really do, guys. And the reason I wanted to pick Michael Tutsi for this, really I wanted to pick the entire defense, but you can't do that. But for all the reasons we've talked about already on the show, and Eric Barrier and his ability to run and scramble, obviously I think the D-line needs to do their job in staying in their pass rush lanes. When he does start to scramble, the hardest thing about it is a defensive player. You never know, because Brian, I know you talked about it, when a quarterback scrambles, sometimes they scramble to throw and not always scramble to run. So as a defensive player, when do I come off my coverage? When do I come up and now I have to go tackle the quarterback? I think that's one of the hardest things. I think Tutsi's going to get put in some situations, obviously in the pass game, but also in those scramble drills where he might have to make a one-on-one tackle with one of the best players in the country. can't just be on him. I think they have to gang tackle a lot today, and that's going to be the key defensively for NDSU. And I think, Michael Tucci, as you guys said, he hasn't gotten picked on a lot because he's one of the best players on this defense, but I think he needs to show up big today.
Yeah, and I think gang tackling is a big thing for North Dakota State today. We talked earlier, guys, about not only finding the quarterback, but if we go off what Kyle says, you got to not only get to the quarterback, you got to get him to the ground.
Yeah, but Barrier is, again, we mentioned earlier, different than Gronowski. Gronowski wanted physical contact. If you remember from the national championship game a couple of years ago, Barrier is the type of guy that he does not want to get hit. Most people don't, but I mean, he's not one that'll put his body on the line much today. So if the Bison can pop him a couple of times, might slow him down.
Less than 7.5 minutes now on the Coors Light countdown clock as we get closer and closer to game time. The game over on ESPN3, which is an online-based application. Don't worry, we'll take you all the way to kickoff. This game really is a balance between the Bison defense, the Bison offense. They need something from both sides.
They do, and I think any opportunity you have to get off the field defensively on third down, you have to find a way to get off the field. And with Dawson Weber and James Kaiser not available today, all of a sudden that secondary and some of that versatility you have in that linebacking core and in that defensive back room gets extremely scarce. Courtney Eubanks probably going to have to see some extended run today. How does Jaden Price and Destin Talbert fit into this with Tutsi? How does Cole Wisniewski react today? And a guy that has not played a lot of meaningful football here young in his career. There's some guys that are going to have to learn on the job against one of the most potent offenses in the nation.
I was just going to say, against the best quarterback in the nation, the best offense in the nation, and the best wide receiver in the nation, Lee.
Brian mentioned Wisniewski. It's going to be a combo thing, trying to replace, if you can, James, Kaiser. I don't know if you can, but the Bison are going to try with Hofstad and Wisniewski. Wisniewski will be in on the most obvious passing situation. Hofstad will be in on the most obvious running situations. So you'll see those two guys going on and off the field a lot, trying to make up for Kaiser, who I would say has been the best defensive player the Bison have had this year.
Do you guys feel like, we talk about the Bobcat heavy lifting player, and Kyle mentioned that I'd like to pick the entire defense. Do you guys feel like the game today is more on the defense, or do you think it's more on the offense for NDSU?
That's a really loaded question.
It really is.
In a lot of ways. I do think it's more on the offense, that if the defense can get off the field, the offense can't just have a 5-play drive that takes 2.5 minutes and miss some critical opportunities, or have like the snap call be wrong. You can't have stuff like that go wrong in the playoffs today. You got to stay on the field. You can't have bad penalties. You can't get behind the chains. You got to continue to move things and be efficient. And unfortunately for North Dakota State, as good as they were in the game against North Dakota the last 2 weeks, I wouldn't say the offense has been very efficient from drive to drive. The defense has had to pick them up in a lot of situations. That cannot be the case today.
And one of the major reasons the Bison offense has to do that is you look at the Eastern offense. The Eagles average, this is average, 84 snaps a game this spring. That's average. So their goal is to get to 100. Which means that they had one in the 60s somewhere along the line. I mean, this is a team that you must keep off the field. Get off on defense, stay on offense.
Again, you can continue to watch that Coors Light countdown clock as it ticks down closer and closer to kickoff. We'll take you all the way to kickoff. Who knows what we'll see in a game like this? We don't know what we've seen from North Dakota State so far, or maybe we do know what we've seen from North Dakota State so far. Who steps up? Who does the things North Dakota State needs to happen to have a chance to win this game and to move on in the playoffs? We'll all watch that together because we truly don't know.
And this defense needs to find a way to get a turnover too. That could really, I think, calm some nerves. I mean, that's been part of the issues. They've just not been able to turn teams over. And when you're -8 in turnover margin, you don't win a lot of football games. NDSU still found a way to win 6 of them. That's going to be key in the special teams. You never know. A big return, a punt, something along those lines could also play dividends down the road.
If there is one thing that leans NDSU's way today, it certainly is special teams. The Bison have been good. Eastern Washington, not so good. Continue to watch that clock. We'll get closer to kickoff, and we'll have much more from the studio. It is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show. Playoff football around the corner.
Welcome back. Just over 30 seconds left on the Coors Light countdown clock. Well, guys, final thoughts.
Well, we've talked a lot about Eastern Washington, their offense, and different stats and numbers. At the end of the day, I think NDSU has to play complementary football better than they have all year long, really get back to what we saw against UND.
Exactly, and clean up things fundamentally on defense. As long as you're able to make those tackles, play your reads, watch your coverage, everything should be okay.
Get some turnovers, maybe that would help
Hopefully,
as well.
that'd be nice.
All right, guys, that'll do it for us on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. This game on ESPN 3. We'll have plenty for you tonight on the news. We'll see you then.